It is one day after the conclusion of the first Israeli-U.S.-Iran war. And for no better person to talk to about this than former ambassador of Israel to the United States, Dr. Michael Oren, because not only is he a diplomat and a former deputy prime minister in Israel, he's a historian. Dr. Oren's been doing this with us for more than a decade, for which I'm grateful, but I have not yet heard him comment on the events of the last 3 days. Dr. Oren, as a historian, where does the last 12 days fit in terms of world historical events?
Well, good. It's been a decade. Boy, did we have gray hair back then? We we're at an historical inflection point. That's where we are. So looking backward, I'll say that never in the 77 years of Israel's existence has the United States joined openly with Israel in offensive operations, or in this case, counteroffensive operations. The United States has come to Israel's aid repeatedly in defensive capacities, taking down missiles, resupplying us, say, for example, during the Yom Kippur War, but never openly joined with us in countering a common enemy. And this is what happened this time. It's true. And certainly in this century, where the United States has been impeded by the trauma of Iraq and Afghanistan, before that of Vietnam, such a bold military move is quite a departure from longstanding American policy, one that has had far-reaching geopolitical global ramifications. I assure you, Hugh, there are people in Beijing who are thinking now we have to pause and think twice before we can consider taking Taiwan. Even Moscow.
So, Dr. Oren,
response is very.
Other than exhaustion, and I assume every Israeli who's been going to a shelter 3 times a night is exhausted for 2 weeks. Other than exhaustion, how do Israelis feel today?
Guarded. Listen, the day began with a flagrant violation by Iran of the ceasefire. 5 people were killed in Beersheba, including the most beautiful couple you can ever imagine, young people. And then when our jets took to the air to retaliate, the president called them back. And so on one hand, we are profoundly grateful for President Trump of what he's done and how he's really what he did was a game changer. This war could have gone on for many weeks longer. As I mentioned on this program before, it's a war of attrition to see which side cried uncle first. And we were paying a very high price, psychologically, socially, financially. And the president ended all that, ended it swiftly. And clearly the Iranians cried uncle first, which is important. Now the inflection point, looking forward, what happens from this point onward? And that's the crucial thing. If this is navigated successfully, everything in the Middle East can change. If Iran is totally neutralized, I don't care, who comes to negotiation Iran side, whether it's representative of the regime or another leadership in Iran, they have to forfeit. Iran's empire, no more support for terror regionally, no more support for terror nationally, no more supporting Hamas and Hezbollah, no more trying.
Have you faded out on us there, Michael?
Assassinate American leaders, no longer trying to. And once you do that, then you open the door to peace between Israel and Lebanon, peace between Israel and Syria, peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia, peace, who knows, maybe someday between Israel and Iran, and you have changed the entire region. You make it secure for us, secure for America, and secure for the world. Our fear today, and I gotta be honest with you, is that Iran has announced today that it's going to start rebuilding its nuclear facilities and replenishing its missile arsenals. And Israel and the United States have to be on the same page, Hugh. We have to be able to say, these are our red lines. You put a brick on Fordo, we're going to act. Or at least Israel will have the ability to act. If not, very quickly, we're going to find ourselves back pretty much where we were on October 7th, 2023. And it can go one of 2 ways. There are a few forks in the road, in history's roads like this. And we're standing at that intersection.
Well, I'm hoping Iran is just blustering because the precedent has been set. Donald Trump has laid down the Trump doctrine. No one who is not currently in the club of nuclear powers may join, period. Let me ask you about best case and worst case. Best case, the poison tree that was pumping poison through its roots, through Lebanon, through Syria, through Gaza and the West Bank and Yemen and Iraq, has been cut off, and those roots will wither, and everyone will sit under their fig and tree and be happy. Worst case, the mullahs have a hidden facility. They're going to enrich rapidly, and they're going to deliver an unconventional, not very sophisticated bomb to your border somehow. Which is more likely?
Either one. A lot of it depends on how America handles this. It really is. The decision is in the hands of the president of the United States. The Iranians, as far as I can see, the Iranians still possess something in the order of 650 kilograms of highly enriched uranium, 20% and 60%. As long as that is not extracted and shipped abroad, then Iran essentially still has threshold capacity. Somewhere along, it's got a missile. It's got a missile that can carry a satellite into space. You can carry a satellite into space. You can carry a nuclear warhead. Somewhere, it has been developing a warhead. You put the enriched material in the warhead, put the warhead on the missile, and you are a nuclear power. Period. And that the United States and Israel have to prevent that. And to know that Iran is now going to get back into negotiations, it's going to try to drag its feet again. What President Trump did in setting a 60-day deadline was magnificent. He's the only person any president in recent memory, who's ever done anything remotely like that. Some people put military options on the table. He actually took it off the table and used it. And that has to continue. Only with a strong negotiated position, which is no enrichment, no nuclear facilities, no ballistic missiles, no warheads, and no support for terror, together backed by a credible military option, will the Middle East be changed and changed irrevocably for the good.
And we would prefer if the Iranian people or some clique of colonels replace the mullahs, but I'm not going to hold my breath. Let me close this way. Assessed Prime Minister Netanyahu for 30 years has been after this program. He's had his haters. He's not unlike Donald Trump. There's Netanyahu derangement syndrome. He's had his people who think he walks on water. You're right there in the middle. You call balls and strikes. Michael, how do the Israelis feel about Netanyahu today?
Well, there's rumors here that he's going to call a snap election in the summer, because he knows that if he ran tomorrow, he'd win overwhelmingly. But Israeli election seasons are 3 months, and many things can happen in the next 3 months. If Israelis see that their lives have been profoundly changed by this military victory, it's a military victory, then he will win. And as I always say, and I say it again and again, it's always premature to eulogize him politically. He will come back. If Israelis feel that this entire war has been for naught, that Iran will simply come back and reconstitute its power and once again pose a strategic threat, not just a tactical threat to the state of Israel, then he will lose. It comes down to that. Losing for Netanyahu doesn't necessarily means he's chucked out of politics. He still has a very strong base, which is not going to change any bit. But still, he won't have the same power. If he runs tomorrow, he will be where Bibi always wants to be, which is in the center of his coalition. He wants to have ministers to the right of him and ministers to the left of him, like the Light Brigade, and charge forth. And
any intimations, by the way, any intimations out of Gaza that Hamas realizes the mothership has crashed and maybe they better make a deal in a hurry and get whatever they can get, including safe passage out of Gaza?
I don't think so. I have not received anything, and I do want to check, if you don't mind. I've just come in from an interview, and I heard something very disturbing in the interview, that a great number of Israeli soldiers were killed today in an ambush. And that would not indicate to me, if that's true, that a number of Israeli soldiers were killed in an ambush tonight. If that is true, and I'm looking just right now at my news, it hasn't, at least through news, they don't say these things until word has been given to parents, but everyone was talking about it tonight. If that's true, it's indicating that, we are still in a very difficult military situation in Gaza, where now the Hamas is operating as a guerrilla force that comes out of tunnels. It shoots a bazooka or plants a mine and goes away. And that's very, very painful. That's going to be very difficult nut to crack. Throughout this war, I've urged on Israeli television that we should be stepping on the gas, full pedal in Gaza right now. The world was not looking. And I don't know if we've done that exactly. We did find the bodies of some former hostages, expired hostages, let's say that, deceased hostages. That's not enough. We're not making a game changer. I hope so. A last word about Bibi, and I have to say this not as a contemporary analyst, but as an historian. And a line from my former memoir, ally would say history is humbling because it reduces the issues we see as mountains to molehills. The big issues for Bibi have been ultra-Orthodox enlistment in the military, judicial reform. 50 years from now, no one's going to remember a thing about them. They will remember this. They will remember
And
this.
well done. They will remember this, and that it was well done and took courage.
He will go down.
Dr. Michael Oren on X. Dr. Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the United States, great friend of the program, great friend of the United States, great voice for Israel. Thank you. Noah Rothman is the senior political writer for National Review. You can follow him on X at Noah C. Rothman. Noah, welcome in the aftermath of the successful strikes by the American B-2s on Iran. I absorbed a lot of stuff, including a lot of National Review stuff. So I don't know if you wrote this or if you said it, but when you stated that or made the observation that the Jewish state, founded in large part by Holocaust survivors, took the enormously symbolic act of blowing the gates off of Evin Prison, I thought that was well observed and said. Well done.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. It's slightly out of my bounds to engage in that sort of metaphysical speculation and even theological speculation. But yeah, it's hard not to see the poetry and the symmetry in between the decades in which there's been quite a bit of discussion, not just among Jewish scholars, but scholars of World War II, about the degree to which it would have been valuable, perhaps necessary, to bomb the camps, the Nazi camps, and the Israeli decision to make this symbolic strike on the entrance of perhaps the world's worst prison, the locus of terror inside this regime. It's hard not to see the parallels, and they're surely not lost on the Israeli government.
Well, I thought it was an excellent point to make, so my hat's off to you. Now, the day after the first Israel-U.S. war against Iran, and there will be others if it reconstitutes its nuclear program, I suspect. How do you feel it's shaking out? Of course, we have a CNN report of unnamed officials leaking a damage assessment that says we didn't destroy the program, and I'm not believing it at all. Might be true, but I'm just not believing that. So what do you think?
Well, I can't gainsay that report. I did see it, came across my transom too. These are very early and initial damage assessments. There are elements within the intelligence community that are synthesized in these reports that are presented to us, perhaps by ODNI and others, that purport to claim that the Iranian program is not especially advanced, that it is years away from having the desire to make a bomb, much less the capability to do so, and had no indications that it was making this bomb. That conflicts with Israeli intelligence. It also conflicts with testimony that we heard from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, who told the Senate, a Senate committee, just hours before Israel launched these strikes, that the Iranians were developing something that looked a lot like to us, like a fissionable device. So there's conflict here. New York Times had a report not too long after these strikes that maintained the whole facility at Fordo was not necessarily destroyed, meaning that every single room imploded. But that seems immaterial if these very complicated and cascading centrifuge facilities, which are sprawling, have been degraded or destroyed to the degree that they cannot function as intended, that they cannot support a nuclear weapons program. And all of this is very big. All of it is interlocking. All of it is complicated. And if you lose one piece, you lose quite a bit of your ability to develop a fissionable device, which is very difficult to do. It requires a lot of state resources, a big footprint. It's the kind of thing that's hard to miss. So we may find out in the next several weeks that Iran has retained enough of its highly enriched uranium to maintain a capacity to build a weapon, or even a few facilities that could support that. But the scientific community that had the knowledge to do that is dead. Most of the facilities that were designed to produce that bomb are destroyed or inoperative or unable, or Iranians cannot access them. So the notion here that its program has only been set back a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, seems to me pretty premature. And if it was, we are now invested in a status quo in which this president needs to maintain the doctrinal approach he's taken to the Iranian bomb, which is that you will not have these facilities. He has promised again and again that we will destroy these facilities whenever they pop up. And I think after 4 years of this administration, he will bequeath that doctrine to the next president. And the next president will be
I believe, by the
way,
your statement of the Trump doctrine, that no non-nuclear power will be allowed to advance to nuclear power status is, in fact, the Trump doctrine. I had earlier said 60 days means 60 days. That's a Trump doctrine, too. But your doctrine is much better put than my doctrine. I do not believe that. What's interesting, longtime critics of Netanyahu, like Yossi Klein Halevi and Daniel Hartman, have had to lay down their antipathy to Netanyahu and say, well done, Mr. Prime Minister, I'm going to go back to hating on you tomorrow. That does not seem to be happening in the United States, Noah Rothman.
Insofar as the public maintains its skepticism of the Trump administration? In what sense?
Yeah, that the left hasn't. Very few people other than Fetterman and one Democratic congressman has come out and said, this was a good idea. Because every president's promised to do it since Bill Clinton.
Yeah, and there's some groping for a rationale, right? And there's indications, there's some really preliminary polling that suggests the American public are a little squeamish about this whole enterprise. So Democrats are positioning themselves to take advantage of that sentiment if it materializes into something that's politically exploitable. I understand that. But they're groping for a rationale to justify inaction in the face of what Israel had established here, not just the threat that Iran poses, which is perpetual and growing, but that the window of opportunity that had been opened up over 18 months of war in which Israel degraded the primary means by which Iran would retaliate for attacks on its nuclear program. The window of opportunity was there, it was wide open, and the Trump administration deserves credit for taking advantage of it. So what Democrats have said is that the threat is not imminent, that this is very much like the run-up to the Iraq War, that we were lied into the Iraq War. I don't think anybody, save Iranian officials, denies that Iran has an illicit nuclear weapons program. It would be pretty hard to pass that one over on us. There's also been the claim that, exposing our troops to the hazards of combat makes them more vulnerable. And we have done a ton of assets positioned in the Middle East. Isn't that really, really dangerous? Mark Kelly said that, to which I would respond, why, Senator, do you think we have 40,000 troops positioned in the Middle East? It's not for fun. They're positioned there because the Iranian regime is constitutionally committed to aggression, and they are there to deter that aggression. If the threat environment in the region changes, our posture would change accordingly, but it just makes absolutely no sense. It's a non sequitur to say that the U.S. military, all of whom are volunteers who signed up for this sort of thing, would reject the idea that they should be put in harm's way. That's why they're there.
That's why I agree. Now, last question. If this was effective, we can finally pivot to the Pacific. I mean, it is what we need to do. It's what we've needed to do for 20 years. If this was effective, the poison roots that spread all over the Middle East have been pulled up. If it was effective. You agree with that?
If the regime were to collapse. So long as the Islamic
or even
Republic
if the
exists,
regime were to say, we don't have any money to try this again. We blew 30 years.
I think we're a long way from any indication that the fundamental character of this regime has changed. And we should be prepared for the prospect that we will have to tend and maintain and mow this lawn from time to time. The Middle East is not going to suddenly become a placid place tomorrow, even if Israel emerges as the regional hegemon, which it looks increasingly like it will. But the threat environment could change if this regime changes character or changes entirely. Look at what happened in Syria. In Syria, we had the last Ba'athist regime, which was an Iranian vassal state. It was guilty of killing Americans, of organizing attacks on Americans during the insurgency in Iraq. And when it disappeared, the United States posture changed dramatically. Now, to the detriment of the Kurds, by the way, who are increasingly exposed to attacks by the Turkish offshoot that is essentially the government there now. But it is less a threat to the United States, less a threat to the West, and as a result, our posture is changing without very many objections from people like me, who said that the American
things are going our way in the
Syria
Middle East. I hope they continue to do so. Noah C. Rothman on X, thank you. Listen to him on The Editors with Rich Lowry, occasionally on the Commentary Podcast as well. Yael Eckstein is the president and global CEO of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, ifcj.org. She's in Israel. Yael, tell me what is the need in Israel right now and how the FCJ is stepping up.
Well, as Israel faces one of the most devastating attacks in its history, there are so many people right now who need help more than ever. We have over 10,000 internally displaced people who have lost their homes in the ballistic missile attacks by Iran. So the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews are the humanitarian first responders on the scene, providing the basics for those who lost their homes, like food and clothing and toothbrushes and pajamas for their children before all the bureaucracy comes in. And these ballistic missiles are huge. And so sometimes you have 2 miles of homes and apartment buildings without windows where elderly are still living. So we're going home to home, delivering food to the poorest elderly in Israel and telling them that they're not alone. There are Christians and Jews in America who are praying for them and who are providing this life-saving aid that couldn't be more timely than now.
And this audience can help by heading over to ICFJ, International Fellowship Christian Jews.org. Follow the directions there. Yael, have you had any sleep for 2 weeks? Because my other friends in Israel have not.
No, we have not had sleep. First of all, I've been out in the field. As soon as there's a missile attack, I go out with my team, and we're also placing bomb shelters in between the missile attacks. We've donated over 100 bomb shelters since this war with Iran began less than 2 weeks ago. And then the little sleep that we're able to get when we're home is interrupted by sirens and ballistic missiles overhead. So last night, me and my family, I have 4 children and my husband and 2 dogs and a cat, we were in the bomb shelter at 4:30 in the morning and at 6:15 in the morning and at 7:30 in the morning and then again at 10:30 in the morning. So sleep is something that we are all exhausted in Israel. We are all living close to our bomb shelters, very alert, but we are hopeful that this war actually ushered in a new day of hope and of light, and these Judeo-Christian values that we hold dear of the sanctity of life will finally be able to flourish instead of the death cults and extremism that these terror groups are exporting.
I share that optimism with you. I think the poison tree has been cut down and its roots may they wither in Lebanon and Syria and Gaza. We will see. But the International Fellowship of Christian Jews are going to keep working at this. During the actual bombardment phase of the last 12 months, there were hundreds and hundreds of alerts. What did your volunteers do during that? Do they have to get to the shelters and then do they immediately go up and finish the Meals on Wheels delivery?
We have the most incredible workers. Here at the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, we distribute aid to over 2.2 million people a year with a staff of 65 people who do that. So we have a lot of partners, a lot of volunteers, and when they're out in the field, it's a very hard decision. I know I've been with elderly when sirens have gone off and they wouldn't make it to the bomb shelter in time. So I had to decide to stay with the elderly, holding their hand, telling them they're not alone, bringing them comfort, and risking myself in that, or leaving them and going to the bomb shelter. So everyone decides for themselves what's right for them. I always end up staying and just being there in comfort with the person who I'm providing that aid for and who I believe God has sent me to in order to bring hope that I won't leave them during the siren.
So Yael, to wrap up, International Fellowship of Christian and Jews on the ground doing work right now. What's the general mood in Israel and why should people help out at ifcj.org?
Right now, the people of Israel have been going through war for almost 2 years. There are so many people who have lost their jobs, their small businesses closing down. And that's at the same time because we are surrounded by so many enemies that the prices for basics like food have gone up, that there are so many people right now who are desperate for the basics, for clothing, for food, for really those are the basics. So I look at the scriptures and I look at what God says to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, shelter the poor, to be there with the basics to provide. And here in Israel, as our friends are praying for the peace of Jerusalem, there's no better way to follow up that prayer of our mouths with our prayers of our hands, with the action to provide that life-saving aid.
Have the American audience stepped up?
Wow, we are so honored to represent the silenced majority. And what I've seen in the outpouring of love and prayers and support, both to me personally, my inbox is exploding with people who are saying, I pray for you, I love you, I stand with the people of Israel. And there's been so many people who have been giving, even if it's $20 to provide one Meals on Wheels to an elderly who needs it. We've seen more support than ever. And it's so encouraging that light will overcome and outshine the darkness.
That is wonderful. ifcj.org. Help out the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. They're longtime partners with Salem, but this isn't sponsored. This is just because we caught Yael awake. ifcj.org. Thank you, Yael, as I've been saying for many days. the strike by America on Iran on Friday was a world historical event. It changes the trajectory of history in the way that very few events definitively do. And since then, I've been listening to everything I can find from anyone who actually has insight. One of those people is Yossi Klein Halevi, the senior fellow at the Hartman Institute in Israel, where he's been a journalist and author for many decades. Also one of the smart guys of Israel. I'm bringing him in today along with Ambassador Michael Oren, so I can get the two guys with the most years between them studying this issue. Welcome, Yossi. It's great to have you back.
Oh, it's wonderful to be with you, always.
Well, thank you. I want to tell you, I did listen to the latest episode of For Heaven's Sake, your podcast with Daniil Hartman, entitled A New Era. So I want to know from you, how do you view the world historical significance of the past 2 weeks?
If you would have asked me yesterday, I would have said to you unequivocally positive. And first of all, and this is still true, Israel's military achievement, I think, is unprecedented in our history. And I can't think of another example of a victory in contemporary times that comes close to what Israel achieved in Iran. For 12 days, we had uninterrupted dominance over Iran's airspace. And we did not lose a single pilot, a single plane, a single Mossad agent on the ground. We set up a Mossad base to manufacture drones inside Iran. I mean, the level of chutzpah, of sheer daring, is something that, I thought that when we took out thousands of Hezbollah operatives using their own beepers as an explosive, that really was something that would be hard to top. What we've done in the last 12 days, I think, is simply stunning. And then to cap it off, President Trump defying world opposition, great skepticism within much of American public opinion, including in part of his own constituency, including in his own inner circle, and the tremendous courage that the president showed in standing up to that opposition and doing the right thing. And I think it's important to emphasize that Trump was not only stepping in to bail out Israel. A nuclear Iran is a world problem. It isn't only Israel's problem. Now, Israel experiences it most acutely because we're on the front line of a nuclear Iran. But what the president understood is that this is humanity's problem. And he decided to stop kicking the can down the road. Now, I began by saying, if you had asked me yesterday,
yeah, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, Yossi.
So the hesitation that I have today in declaring this an unequivocal victory, and by the way, I should say that whatever happens, however this plays out, your description of the events of the last days is spot on. This is a world-changing event, however it plays out. What worries me today is what's the game plan? Iran has announced that it's going to rebuild its nuclear program. We know that it has at least 400 kilo of weapons-enriched uranium, which is enough to manufacture 9 or 10 atom bombs. And we don't know where that is. And if Iran makes a dash for the bomb, is Israel going to be allowed by the administration to resume the war? Will Trump be able to once again defy so much of American opinion and step in a second time? I was very concerned. I was really uneasy. I felt very uneasy by the way in which the president chose to frame the ceasefire between Israel and Iran. He called it peace. He said this is a peace that's going to last for years. I hope the ceasefire lasts for a few weeks. And to confuse a very shaky and dubious ceasefire, which I welcome, by the way. Anyone who has spent the last 12 days in a shelter in Israel welcomes this ceasefire. But this is not peace. It's not remotely peace. And where's plan B? Where's the warning to Iran that don't you dare make a dash for a bomb because we're still on to you? So
Yossi, I believe that
uneasy.
message.
I'm uneasy.
I think that message will have been sent repeatedly from both the United States and Israel to everybody with whom the Iranians speak. And I believe it is within our writ to come back immediately. But I also don't think we have to put it out there in blood that we're coming after you if you do this again. I think there's a term in the law, res ipsa. The thing speaks for itself, loquitur, res ipsa loquitur. The thing speaks for itself. Once you've done this, you can do it again. And you can do it again to the same country. So that doesn't worry me. What worries me, by the way, I'm surprised that I found any Israelis who are awake today. Because I've been talking to people who've been going back and forth to shelters with babies for, 2 weeks, and no one had any sleep. So I'm really grateful for you for joining me. All right, pause right there. We'll come back. Yossi and I spoke the 30 minutes right before the program. So I'm going to play a little bit in each hour today because he really is a special presence in Israel, well respected by left, right, and center, thoughtful. He and Daniil Hartman are a completely different podcast from anything else you've ever listened to, for heaven's sake. They've now hooked up with Dan Senor and Arc Media to produce it even more often, I think, and I'm grateful for that. I have to begin this segment by taking my Relief Factor because I'm still moving like I've got a brace on. I don't. Getting better. Relief Factor is helping me get better. And if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you can see the 4 pills in every Relief Factor supplement. And you can see that I used to take them in the morning with lukewarm coffee. Now I take them with Trader Joe's water. And I take them every day, even when I've wrenched my back, because it gets it back into better shape, and walk to the market today. So slowly, it's not a trundle, but it'll be fine in a couple of days, thanks to Relief Factor. I encourage all of you who have minor aches and pains, who throw your back out, who have a bad knee or a bum calf or a sore shoulder, give it a shot. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief connects you to relieffactor.com. Or you can go right to their website, find the starter pack for $19.95 at relieffactor.com. You can also go to the website for besthotgrill.com. And those two will actually help. Because if you're grilling, you're not going to be lifting boxes of books that will hurt you. But really, the besthotgrill.com is the Solaire infrared grill, the greatest grill made in America, probably the greatest grill made in America, and the United States, and Mexico, and Canada, and the world. The Solaire infrared grill is, however, made in America. It heats from 0 to 1,000 degrees in 3 minutes, seals in the very finest juices of the steak. It is the secret to enjoying barbecue. You get a little one for someone who's graduating this month, or a big one for Grandpa who you forgot it. He should have been honored on Father's Day. Go to besthotgrill.com, and remember, you can try it before you buy it, and it's hotter than an Iranian oil field, according to Dwayne. And speaking of Dwayne, the My PhD weight loss poster child, 864-644-1900. That's
864-644-1900.
Don't you think my PhDweightloss.com goes well with besthotgrill.com?
It's the best 1-2 punch in all of radio. Sponsors.
It's sort of like a B-2 followed up by
another
an Israeli
B-2
airstrike.
Yes.
Yeah, another B-2.
Yes.
So there, the B-2 of diets is the myPhDweightloss.com. Dwayne lost 50 pounds on that 2.5 years ago. He's kept it off for 2.5 years. He's only had a few serious lapses into comas. One came in Disney World this past weekend when he popcorned out.
Yes.
But you didn't balloon up like the Goodrich
I
balloon.
I did not. I haven't. I've been on my best behavior since, so everything's planing out just fine.
When I tell people about when you've slipped on the air, does your counselor call you up and say, "I heard that"?
No, very few people listen to you.
They should call you up. Everyone should call you up. They should say, Dwayne, stick on the program. You don't want to go back to being Big Dwayne. 864
644
1900 or myphdweightloss.com. Do you have another catchy phrase for besttalkgrill.com?
Oh, absolutely. They get hotter faster than a CNN take on damage assessment.
There you go. You can throw that one out and burn it too. myphdweightloss.com and Best Talk Grill, two of the greatest sponsors around. Ditto Relief Factor, joined by Brett Baer of Fox News. Brett, before we get to the remarkable events of the past 2 weeks, I want to tell people, last week I read your brand new book, To Rescue the American Spirit, Teddy Roosevelt and the Birth of a Superpower. I think it's your best history book yet, and my hat is off to you. It doesn't drop till October. People should pre-order now. But did you have as much fun writing this as I did reading it?
I did. I really did. I mean, he's such a character. He's so rich in so many different ways. And then to pinpoint the kind of forward-leaning where he gets to the point where he thinks America should be that superpower, and kind of the soda straw look at that moment and how he gets there. He's just a rich character to study and to read about. And as you saw, it's a pretty quick read.
What I want to ask you about, you know Trump well, and neither of us know Teddy Roosevelt. But do you guess that the energy level is similar?
I do. And actually, when I was writing it, that came across to me, as like a larger than life figure, sort of like Donald Trump is. And I think that there are parallels in where we are. And it's an interesting time that I think is going to translate. By the time the book comes out, October 21st, we'll see where we are in the world.
Now, let's go back one day. J.D. Vance, the vice president, comes to your studio because basically it's on the tour now. Everyone who comes to Washington, whether they're elected by Americans or not, comes by Brett's studio. When you walked in, did you have any idea we were on the verge of a ceasefire?
None. Zero. We were in the middle of Jennifer Griffin and Trey Yingst. The vice president was on the set next to me getting ready to, after Trey was done, we were going to start the interview. As Trey is kind of wrapping up and doing his live portion at the back end of his piece, my producer gets in my ear, Truth Social posts ceasefire between Iran and Israel. And I said, what is this, Truth Social? Then his staff runs in with an iPhone and shows him the Truth Social post, and he reads it on the iPhone. Trey Yingst wraps up live. I say thank you, introduce the vice president, and start with literally what just dropped seconds ago. So it was amazing.
I'm laughing. I had Tom Cotton on at the same time, and I read him the president's tweet, but I couldn't not laugh in the middle. I mean, it's world-breaking news, but it was so funny. They were allowed to go on their own way. It was just very funny. And did you get a chuckle out of the Truth Social post at the same time that it's deadly serious?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, how he structures it, how he says it, thank you for your attention to the matter at the end.
Yeah.
And then, I went back to it. I obviously asked about it and what this means, and you saw the interview. But at the end, I went back and said, how often does this happen when you're going to an interview and suddenly a Truth Social post drops that changes the whole dynamic? He said, with this administration, it happens a lot.
Well, I think they're going to clip that and get your permission to use it in J schools on how to respond to breaking news, especially when you've got a principal with you because you didn't not cover it. You went right at it, and the vice president was very good, and it was a big day. Now let's go further back. Brett, you've been covering major events since you got up here for 9/11, like with a day's notice or a day after you got here. And so 25 years of nonstop big weeks. But how do you rank the last 2 weeks in those 25 years?
I mean, it's up there as far as tempo and big events and, blockbuster things. Who knew that we'd be where we are right now? I think it is tenuous. I do think, there's reason to be skeptical, but right now the president feels confident that it's going to hold, that both of these countries are pretty tired and tapped out. I think there are real questions about the battle damage assessment of the Iranian nuclear facility and, more importantly, the highly enriched uranium, which I tried to get to with the vice president. And, I think there's going to be this classified briefing up on Capitol Hill that lawmakers are going to learn a little bit more.
I'm going to talk with the chair of the House Intel Committee in hour 3, but I will note CNN has run a story debunking the damage, suggesting it wasn't that great. Not long thereafter, the Times of Israel ran a story, quote, Israeli intelligence assesses that the U.S. and Israeli strikes set back Iran's nuclear program by several years, but did not completely destroy it. I wouldn't have imagined we completely destroyed it, Brett. I think we sent a message, don't start again. And now the Iranians came out and said they're starting again, but of course they're going to say that. I don't believe them, do you?
I don't, but, you never know with the Iranians. And New York Times is saying that their read of classified, from officials is that it's set it back 6 months. We don't really know until the IAEA gets in there, and I'm not sure they're going to let them in there. I think there's a real question about the 900 pounds of highly enriched uranium. And if they're going to get back to the negotiating table or if we're back to square one, I think we'll find that out in probably 48 hours.
Now, how do you judge the stability of the regime, Brett, from afar? Because it seems to me Ayatollah Khamenei ought not to sit with his back to any doors or windows for a long time.
I agree. I think, they knew where he was, know where he is. They took out a lot of the people underneath him to the point where he was naming successors down a row, for different positions because they were taking them all out. And the person who stepped in next. They've taken out a lot of the IRGC. They've taken out a lot of the apparatus that goes after people inside the country. So I think the regime is pretty weak, but it's still the regime. And, we just have to look back to 2009 and the Green Revolution to say that if there was an uprising, a revolution, in the past, they have managed to put it down, kill people, and squelch it. And we'll see what happens this time if there is one.
And so last question, Brett. I was on Special Report on Thursday night with you. When I said it's the most important decision the president's ever faced, I wasn't certain he was going to do yes. He was going to say yes and send it, and I certainly didn't know he was going to do it on Friday. Where were your inclinations last week at that time? You didn't have an opinion on your own. You never do when the panel's on.
Yeah, I thought that he was more than likely going to pull the trigger. And I just hearing things along the way, believed that the operation was already in motion and that he was waiting for final call. And I think that's what ended up happening. It turns out that 2 weeks within 2 weeks is, 2 days is within 2 weeks. And it was more of a ruse. And I think he had gotten his head around it well before that.
I think that's well put. 2 days is within 2 weeks, and that's definitive. Brett Baer will be watching tonight on Special Report at 6 p.m., America's Newsroom, and everyone should be watching it every night at 6 because the news happens there first, sometimes in live real time when the vice president's sitting there and True Socials drop. That's going to go down in the history of journalism. Brett Baer, thank you so much. Let me check now the markets, brought to you by our friends at AmericanFederal.com. American Federal can be called at 800-221-7694 if you want to buy gold, and today might be that day. The Dow went up 1.19%, the S&P went up 1.11%, and the NASDAQ went up 1.43%. But if we run down to gold, gold fell $60 today to $3,336 an ounce. And that was, I told you 2 days ago, when the world was on edge, they didn't know what Iran was going to do. It was over 3,400. Okay, deep breath. Iran's shut up and sat down. They're making noise, but they're not doing anything. They're not firing more missiles. This war is over for the time being. Gold has retreated to what I think is the new normal, $3,336 an ounce. So you might want to call Nick today, 800-221-7694, because I imagine it's going to be saying down there for a couple of days or so, and you might say, okay, I'm going to start my annual buy on June the whatever the date is today, June the 24th, and we're going to talk every 3 months thereafter. I'm going to buy more gold, or I'm going to do it quarterly or semi-annually or annually. Nick will work out a program with you. We'll explain the more gold you buy, the less the commission. The more gold you sell, the less the commission. But the key part is diversify your portfolio. It's good to have a diversified portfolio. 800-221-7694. I've told you before, I'll tell you again. I begged Nick to become my sponsor. There are a lot of gold people in America. I'm sure some of them are very nice, but some of them are not. And Nick has been in this business for 40 plus years, has the reputation of reputations, completely transparent, completely honest, very straightforward with you. What you see is what you get. If you're one of those people that love to talk coins, he'll do that with you all day long too, because he's a fun guy. But if you're just trying to diversify your wealth and you want some precious metals, Nick Grovich and his team at AmericanFederal.com. 800-221-7694. Earlier today, right before the program, Yossi Klein Halevi, one of Israel's leading public intellectuals, authors, and historians, journalists, joined me for a half-hour talk on the day after. This is part 2 of that conversation with Yossi Klein Halevi. All of it is already posted at my YouTube channel, and you can now watch it on the Salem News Channel or listen to it in your car, part 2. What do you want Americans to think about this at the end? And let's limit it to non-Jewish Americans, people who might not generally follow the state of Israel to the extent that this Gentile does. But what do you want Americans to know about what Israel feels today?
So first of all, I think it's really important for Americans to understand that while President Trump is truly one of the greatest friends that Israel and the Jewish people have had, he did not do this for us. He did it primarily for America and for the world, and that's really important to keep one's focus on. What I would also hope Americans would understand is that what Israel is up against is not a Palestinian uprising against oppression. That's how the left, much of the left, misinterprets, distorts the October 7th Hamas massacre. That was a premeditated assault by radical Islamism against the existence of a Jewish state. And that's the nature of the war that Israel is fighting. And we need to really keep the focus on the significance for humanity, whether or not the world acknowledges it. And look, we're not fighting radical Islamism for the sake of the world. We're doing it, let's be very straight about this. We're doing this because it is in our most immediate self-interest. Our survival is on the line as the only non-Arab, non-Muslim state in the Middle East. And we are the only Middle East minority that has succeeded in achieving national sovereignty. Look at the condition of all the other minorities in the Middle East, and you can see what fate would await the Jews if we ever lost our sovereignty and our ability to defend ourselves. So we are fighting radical Islamism for ourselves. But there is a clear consequence of Israel's war, which is we're the front line in the West's struggle against radical Islamism, whether or not the West realizes that struggle even exists.
Well, I like to tell people,
clearly
Yossi,
Say
I
it
think
again?
Israel has been the leader of the West for 2.5 years, and
Yeah.
there's been actually it's not yet 2 years. It's since 10/7 Israel has been the leader of the West, and we are only getting back into the saddle with you, and soon we'll be back doing what we normally did. But my hat is off to the Israeli people and to the IDF for carrying the war to the enemy, and they are the enemy of civilization, not just of Israel and the United States, but of civilization. Now, I want to talk with you about best case and worst case, Yossi, because I've been thinking a lot about this since Friday night. Best case, there's been a tree with long roots growing, poisonous roots, out of Iran, into Lebanon and Syria and Gaza and the West Bank and into Yemen. And the tree's been cut down and the roots are going to wither. And those states are going to have a chance, as well as Israel, to live in peace and sit under their own fig tree. Worst case scenario, the mullahs have secret facilities that we don't know about. They're going to achieve a weapon, a crude one, and they're so angry they're going to use it against Israel as soon as they get a truck to drive it through Syria. What concerns you? Which is more realistic?
Right now, I think that we're dealing with so many unknowns that it's really hard to say. If you had told me a month ago, 2 weeks ago, that the Israeli Air Force would have uncontested dominance over Iran's skies for 12 days, I would have said that's not very realistic. If you had told me 2 years ago that 3,000 Hamas terrorists would cross the border and the Israeli army would be in complete disarray for a full day and not be able to contend with mass slaughter, I would have said that doesn't sound very realistic. So we are witnessing one event after another of such enormous proportions and events that strain belief that I really don't know how to answer that question. I think that the possibility of some breakout in Iran is realistic. The caveat that I would raise here is that, and this I think is going to be the most interesting development to watch in the coming days and weeks, is what happens within the Iranian regime itself. I think we're going to see a tremendous bloodletting, metaphorically and perhaps even literally, of people accusing each other, the leadership accusing one another of either colossal incompetence, which is certainly true, or outright treason. And I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to see a series of executions following this event. And so the regime is the most important, for me, the most important and interesting development that we really need to focus on is the stability and the internal cohesiveness of the regime.
I agree with that. Let's pause it there. We'll come back for part 3 in hour 3 of today's program. Again, it's already over at YouTube. I would love it, by the way, if you would like and subscribe. We're at 89,000 subscribers, and that just means we put up a couple of videos today. They pop up on your timeline. I'd love to get to 100,000 because the boys at Ruthless beat me there, but I'd like to catch them. So thank you for going over to YouTube, Hugh Hewitt Show, liking and subscribing it. Let me tell you about AndrewandTodd.com, great sponsors of our show. Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian, that's the AndrewandTodd.com and AndrewandTodd.com. You can reach them at 888-888-1172. They are mortgage bankers. They lend you the money. They underwrite the loan. They are soup to nuts. If you're a veteran and you don't want to put any money down, use AndrewandTodd.com. First-time home buyer and you're clueless about what you're doing, call AndrewandTodd.com. You're a senior citizen and you want to get a home equity line of credit or you want to get a reverse mortgage, you call AndrewandTodd.com. 888-888-1172. Now, I've done 4 houses with Andrew and Todd. The family's done a couple of more. Dwayne's done his house with Andrew and Todd. A lot of people in Salem, a lot of friends. I've never had anyone disappointed with their service. It's kind of hard to imagine anyone not liking Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian and not becoming their friend. But you have to call them to find that out. And some of you have to move because you've got too many kids in one house that was bought 10 years ago, or you've been transferred, whatever it is. If you need to move, do it with professionals as your bankers. AndrewandTodd.com with Sierra Pacific Mortgage, 888-888-1172, 888-888-1172. Brent Gardner is the Vice President of Americans for Prosperity, a sponsor of our program and a wonderful guest. Brent, I will get around to the big, beautiful bill, which I talk to you about every week, but I first want your general thoughts on Middle East has been a roller coaster for a couple of weeks. How's the stability at home striking you?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, look, there's a lot of things that Americans can't deal with or can't control. There's a lot of things that Congress can't control and that are going to happen to us. But one thing that they definitely can do is work on some of the economic packages that are in front of them right now. And so I think that's the best way that we can focus on ensuring stability is ensure that we've got a stable economy back home.
You know, the other thing is I want our drillers to drill. I want to produce oil. I'm glad that West Texas and Brent are falling, but we need the big beautiful bill, and I'll come to that in a second. But first, talk to me about the rescissions package, which got out of the House. Is that going to get out of the Senate?
That's a great question. I mean, it's $9.4 billion. It's not nothing, but it's definitely something that I think people who are fans of trying to get our spending and our fiscal house in order would say is a no-brainer. It's a relatively small number. Today, that's in the hands of Senator Susan Collins, and there'll be a hearing tomorrow. And hopefully, there's a lot of different paths that can be taken. Hopefully, it's the kind of thing that they move on, they vote on, and put on the president's desk. But there's a lot of things that could happen there.
My understanding is, if it gets out of appropriations with Senator Collins as chair, it goes to the floor of the Senate, and it does not need cloture. Am I correct about that?
That's correct. It just takes a simple majority, and we can put it on the president's desk.
And that would be the same for the one big beautiful bill. So like Freddy Krueger in the movies, I come back asking the same thing every week. How goes the one big beautiful bill?
Well, we're seeing some progress. Not all progress is great. We've seen the Senate parliamentarian doing a lot of work during what's called the bird bath this week, where items contained within the bill are ruled as either possible to move under that specific rule that allows you to be able to move with a simple majority or not. And of the 1.5 trillion, about 300 billion of it has been ruled as something that can't be in the bill. And so right now we see the Senate working live to try and address places where they had initially had cuts. And that means policy. And so from that perspective, we're seeing a lot of members work quickly on issues. But from a process perspective, we expect to see votes starting as early as Friday and moving into the weekend with Votorama. So I think we're moving towards a final product, and hopefully we'll see it this weekend.
Now, Brent, they can fill that hole a little bit from parliamentarian rulings by adding revenue, by taxing gaming, or by selling American lands or leases or spectrum, or allowing a conversion windows for IRAs to Roth IRAs at a flat tax. Any conversation about revenue enhancements that are not taxes?
Yeah, there's a lot of conversations in this space, but as far as progress, I don't know that any of these things are getting settled yet. I think with the bird bath ongoing, I think they're trying to understand how deep the well goes. And I think members have been, to this point, a little bit surprised at the number of things that are coming out. But to your point, there's still good policy that can be utilized to address those places where we've lost on savers. And there's other savers that are possible as well. So I do think that senators are dedicated and they do want to get this done. So I think over the next 24 or 48 hours, we'll start to see some of those things come into view. But to your point, all of those things are possible, and all of those things have been potential discussion points on this bill.
So, Brent, I read something in passing that Speaker Johnson would prefer not to have a conference, would prefer to get a Senate bill that the House can pass. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, it is. And ultimately, that's the best way for this process to happen. The longer things sit out in the sun, the harder they become to be able to work. When you start seeing things ping pong back and forth, it can become challenging. And I think ultimately the goal here is to create the shortest distance between 2 points. And that is today, the US Senate and the president's desk. And for that, it still has to touch the House one more time, doing it in such a way that allowed the House to be able to vote on it, pass it, and put it on the president's desk. That's certainly the thing that everyone thinks would be the best.
Now, Leader Thune will be on tomorrow, and I assume he's going to say everything's great because that's what leaders do. But do you think everything's pretty good in the Senate?
I'm cautiously optimistic on this, Hugh, but I am optimistic, and I think that's a good place for us to be. The great news from what I've seen and from what I've heard and from what activists and volunteers and voters across this country have said is that they're out reaching out to members. They're reaching out to senators. They're reaching out to the president, and they're saying, we want this now. And I think with that kind of support from the American people and the type of interest that we have in seeing this get done, I have to believe it does. And I think members have been really focused on trying to find a way to get to yes on this and make it a process that allows us to put it on the president's desk. So I do expect it to happen. I'm hopeful that we get a great bill out of it, and I think we're headed in a good direction. We've got to pass it. We got to pass it now.
All right, and folks, go to protectprosperity.com to lend your voice to the effort by AFP to get this over the 1 yard line. Iran did not get their nuke program over the 1 yard line, but AFP and our friends up on the Hill are working very hard on the one big beautiful bill. Help them out. Protectprosperity.com. Protectprosperity.com. Byron York is the senior political writer for the Washington Examiner, also a Fox News contributor. A lot of people rely on AI. I rely on Byron York. Byron, can you tell me who's going to win the New York mayoral race? Because the guy who calls himself a socialist but has a lot of communist policies on the table looks to me to be a menace to a city that is pretty much indestructible but could very well be destroyed.
My goal is to be better than Grok. Well, it's interesting. We could have, I think, a more comprehensible conversation if it weren't for this ranked choice voting that's going to take place, which I still find difficult to understand. And if you look at the Emerson poll of this, which tried to replicate or predict the results of each round of ranked choice voting, I think the winner came in the 9th round. So I don't know when this is. But I do think that Zoran Mamdani, the Democratic Socialist of America candidate, has obviously already made his mark on this race. And unless he's really repudiated in tonight's results, and I don't think that's going to happen, he's a power in New York now, and it's a terrible choice, obviously, with him versus Andrew Cuomo, but my guess is that Cuomo wins after all of this rigmarole, but I wouldn't bet a lot of money on it.
If Mamdani wins, it's a nightmare for Democrats in the country. They're going left. They're going further left than I ever thought, and I think this will accelerate it.
Yeah, I think because of current events, there's been so much attention to Mamdani and Middle East issues, this globalized, the Intifada stuff, and that sort of stuff. But I think people maybe really haven't even wrestled with how bad a Mamdani mayoralty would be for crime in the city, for policing in the city, for welfare spending, for spending in general in the city, for all the sort of things that affect the quality of life in New York City. I don't think we've had quite enough sort of debate about that because everybody's gotten so carried away with anti-Semitism or the Intifada and blah, blah, blah. But I think he would be a disaster on many fronts if he were.
I can't imagine going to this city if it got worse than it is. I love the city. Let me switch over to President Trump, Byron. You've been covering him like I have since he came down the escalator. In those 10 years, I think this weekend at the NATO summit is his peak moment where there is no Angela Merkel to lecture him, where Macron is a moron and Keir Starmer's got 25% approval ratings, and he just pulled off an attack on Iran that ended their nuclear program for the foreseeable future. He must be on top of the world.
Yeah, I would think so, provided everything lasts, and it seems to have stabilized today. But I would think so. I kind of looked at this in relation to a much smaller event that also occurred during Trump's presidency in the first term, and it was. Remember when he moved the American embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem? Congress had voted for years to do this, had directed that it be done for years, and then there was kind of a bipartisan consensus to not actually do it. There were these predictions that, it would set off rounds of terrorism, the world would end, there'd be some terrible effects if you did this. And Trump comes into office first time and says, you want to do this? Let's do it. And just did it. And the world didn't end. There weren't, to my knowledge, any terrible effects from doing it. And it was, as I said, something that Congress had directed to be done multiple times over the decades. So, I think now Trump has done another thing that you're not supposed to do, or it would set off a total disaster if you did it. And I think his efforts, combined with the attacks from Israel, from 10 days to 2 weeks of really devastating attacks from Israel, has kind of revealed how weak Iran really was. I mean, when they had a lot of money, given it to it by Barack Obama and Joe Biden, when they had a lot of money, they could make terrible mischief in a terrorist kind of way. And October 7th is the worst example of that. But they don't have superpower strength. They don't have.
No.
They had no military.
What do you make of people online, particularly Obama-era alums, who have got JCPOA attachment syndrome, and they really cannot let go of the JCPOA? They're embarrassing themselves.
Well, I think they're actually embarrassed. I think they themselves are embarrassed by this, because we've seen a couple of times when Trump just does something that the Obama people talked about for years. They say, "Wow, maybe we could have just done that." And I think this is the same situation. Now, I will say, I have seen memes on Twitter and the like today where they say something to the effect, Bill Clinton said Iran must never have a nuclear weapon. George W. Bush said Iran must never have a nuclear weapon.
Mark Levin put
Obama
that out.
said it.
Yeah.
Huh? Yeah.
Mark
Barack
Levin.
Obama said it, and then Joe Biden said it, and then Donald Trump did it. Well, the fact is, Iran did not have a nuclear weapon through any of those presidents. For whatever the reason, they didn't have a nuclear weapon through any of those presidencies, and Trump has obviously set them back by far the most of any president. I don't know if it's forever, but they got a big long road back.
Do you think he'll do it again if they get close again?
Oh yeah. I think.
Oh yeah.
Listen, I think I had written before Trump did this. I had written that there was growing evidence that Israel could have taken care of the Fordo problem itself. I'm sure there were many, many different ways to take care of the Fordo problem. That they could have done it without U.S. bunker buster bombs. Well, Trump decided to bomb it, take care of it in one night. But I think going forward, I mean, one of the things we've seen about Israel's performance is they know everything that's happening in Iran. They've deeply penetrated every part of their nuclear program, and if they try to reconstitute anything, they're going to get it knocked out immediately.
And we're going to know about it. And I will trust their battle damage assessment when it comes out from Israel, not from CNN. Byron York, great to talk to you. Washington Examiner chief political correspondent. Follow him on X at Byron York. See him on Fox News as well. Representative Rick Crawford, who is chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, will be joining me in the next segment. I do want to begin this segment by reminding you I've made the switch to consumer cellular and strongly encourage you to do the same thing. 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. The promo code is HUGH25 if you call them at 1-800-411-4454. New customers get a $5 credit on each of their first 5 monthly invoices if you make the switch, if you're a new customer and you use the code HUGH25. Now, you don't have to sacrifice service for savings. You can have both. Consumer Cellular is a fabulous network, covers everything, same wonderful quality you're used to. You can keep your number, you can keep your data, or you can keep your device and everything, or you can get all new on everything. Mostly, though, I want you to figure out what you're paying on your cellular bill, and if you can't, you're paying too much. And then I want you to give a hard think to how much data you need. If you're over 50, you probably don't need an unlimited data plan. You're not downloading a lot of video games, but you might want one. You can get 2 lines for $60 a month from Consumer Cellular, unlimited data, or you can get a cheaper plan for 5 gigs, 10 gigs, whatever you need. They'll work on it with you. And when you call 1-800-411-4454 and you tell them promo code HUGH25, they will also pick up very quickly. You'll get one, press 2, one keyboard to find out one thing about you, and then you go talk to a live human being in America. So try Consumer Cellular or go to consumercellular.com/Hugh. consumercellular.com/Hugh, and you'll be in on that. Don't forget as well, Relief Factor. I took it in the first hour. One more pack for tomorrow, and getting better. Thanks for all of you who have asked me about how I feel. I'm getting better. I can slowly move around, and by tomorrow, I walked a very slow mile today, but it's almost unfrozen. It happens. People with backs out there know what happens when you strain them. And it takes about 3 days, 4 days, takes less time with Relief Factor. You ought to call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. Really does help with the minor aches and pains and back strains that accompany a vigorous life. A vigorous life is Jack Kemp. Vigor. You got to have vigor. And if you want vigor, get relieffactor.com. The only supplement I've taken in more than 20 years. Been taking it for more than 10 years daily. When I do something stupid like Thursday, I start taking it 2 and 3 times a day, but normally it's 1 pack a day. The 3-week starter pack is $19.95, less than $1 a day. All you have to do is call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, or go to their website, relieffactor.com. Find the starter pack for $19.95. The starter pack cannot be missed at relieffactor.com. Try it. You'll thank me for trying it. Rick Crawford is the congressman from Arkansas. He is also the chairman of the House Intel Committee. Congressman, welcome back. Talked to you last week before the United States got involved in the Israel-Iran war. Today, CNN is reporting that someone in the intelligence community says we didn't do much damage, but in Israel, Israeli intelligence assesses that U.S. and Israeli strikes set back Iran's nuclear program by several years, but did not completely destroy it. What have you heard in your capacity as a member of the Gang of Eight?
Well, I would say, first off, I would take Israeli intelligence word for it over CNN, number one. That's just me. But from the Gang of Eight perspective, we've not been briefed on this. We've seen some products, but again, so early to tell. We're still hours, just maybe a couple of days away from when that strike took place. So I think it's really, really early, at least for us and our equities, to be able to say definitively what damage was inflicted, how much, and to what degree. So I think the real winner here is the fact that the strike was wildly successful in that it drove Iran back to the table, and look, and we end up with a ceasefire. Now, look, it's like any breakup. It's going to take maybe an effort or two before you actually, it's completely ratified, but reconciliation rather. But it's a back and forth. But I think it's a pretty amazing accomplishment that whether the extent of the damage is still unknown. But what we do know is that it really brought Iran back to the table in a way that said they don't want us to come back and visit them again in this context.
Now, Chairman, you've been around for a while. Do you believe that Donald Trump has established a precedent on which future presidents will rely, that if anyone is attempting to develop a nuclear weapon who's not already in the nuclear club, we're going to step in and stop them?
If they don't, they are missing out on a pretty important lesson. I would say that he basically reset American foreign policy as it applies to Iran or any other nation for that matter. As you said, it's not already in a nuclear, possess a nuclear capability. We're not going to tolerate any more. And that's certainly true in Iran. And that was demonstrated loud and clear. And look, the Iranians got the message, and that's the success story here.
Now, Mr. Chairman, are you talking to your staff about talking to the Office of Homeland Security and the Department of Defense about hardening our home front in the aftermath of these attacks from inside Iran against Iran and inside Russia against Russia's strategic assets? I don't want to wake up someday and find these B-2s have been hit by drones that were in a cornfield owned by the Chicoms.
Right. No, we've actually been having this conversation before this strike ever took place. In fact, this is one of the areas that I wanted to shore up when I became chairman. So this was on my list of priorities, and that is counterintelligence as it applies to homeland security. And so, look, what really brought me to that point was the fact that our border was open for 4 years, and we don't know the extent of what cells may have materialized here in the United States as a result of that lax border policy under the previous administration. And so it's been my mission to really shore up the federal law enforcement enterprise as it applies to counterintelligence and our ability to counter threats of terror or other things, spying or whatever, here at home. It's difficult for us to operate in other countries. It's easy for other countries to operate in ours. And so we have to be much more diligent in that space.
Now, Mr. Chairman, long ago and far away, when you were in grade school, I was a special assistant to William French Smith and Ed Meese in charge of FISA warrants. And there was no National Security Division at Justice. There were just a couple of lawyers in the AG's office and the FBI. And there were a lot of bad guys in the United States. That was a real slap in the face for a 24-year-old kid to find out how many spies were in the United States. Do you think the counterintelligence capacity of the FBI has kept pace with the threat?
No, I don't. I think this is why we want to maybe revisit that construct. And, it has to do with their desired instinct, their desired outcome, if you will. And that is to say, they want to arrest people all the time. What I think we need to be thinking about is thwarting plots. We need to intercept people engaged in espionage and so on. It's not necessarily always about making the case to DOJ for prosecution. It may be about preventing and disrupting plans and preventing operations and things of that nature. So a lot of it has to do with perspective.
Have you been party to any conversations about the alert status in the United States from alleged sleeper cells in the U.S.?
Yes, it is a topic of conversation. We have seen the alerts. There's alerts out there to the general public. So the extent that we have been alerted is, the same thing that they're seeing out there, that they're sending out travel warnings, from the State Department. Be careful when you're traveling overseas. That's just good common sense, and it has been for, since 1979, if we're being honest about it. I mean, the reality is, since the Islamic Revolution took place in Iran in 1979, those elements have taken great delight in terrorizing the world, and particularly acting out against American targets, American citizens. So that's good sound advice when you're traveling, generally speaking. It's particularly relevant now, but it also, I think we need to be careful here at home. That is to say, look, when you're out and about, if you see something, say something doesn't feel right, doesn't smell right, you get the spidey senses tingling. Trust your instincts. Probably not good to be there. Remove yourself from that position. Be careful in crowded spaces. As you see that it doesn't take much. Look at New Orleans back in January. It doesn't take much to inflict great harm. And it's not necessarily that they're trying to kill a whole lot of people in one single attack. It's mostly they're trying to get into, this is almost a psyop. A lot of these terrorist attacks are psychological operations that are designed to have an impact on our economy, to create social upheaval, and to really make us fear being out and about. And that's one of the things that it's our open society is a huge blessing, but it's a challenge, and it's also an opportunity for folks outside of our country to exploit.
So, last question, Mr. Chairman. You've been studying in the Iranian mullahs for a long, long time, and now you're chair of Intel. How brittle is that regime? And when would you expect the aftershocks of the pummeling that they have taken over the past, 2 weeks to surface?
I would say that the evidence of how brittle that regime is can be probably exemplified by the fact that they launched a strike against American targets in Qatar, but not before they notified us that they were doing so that their people could see that they were retaliating. That was done for effect. That was also a psyop. That was done to impact the population in Iran, to say we're still in charge and we're still capable of responding. Because what they didn't want to see was the everyday Iranians go, look, our leadership's weak, our regime is weak. This is the time we need to seek regime change. So they took that, and this is just my opinion. I think they took that measure as much as anything to show the Iranian people that they were still in charge.
And it's not that effective of a video. I mean, did you think it was a blockbuster? I think it was kind of pathetic.
No, but it served their propaganda purposes, and they're all about propaganda, and that's how they've managed to subjugate their people since 1979.
Well, we hope for a day coming soon of change. Chairman, great to talk to you. Thank you for coming back. Rick Crawford represents the Arkansas District Number 1, and he is a great friend of the program. We appreciate your taking the time, Mr. Chairman. I want to remind all of you who are out there that this is a Relief Factor studio. I take Relief Factor every day, and even though I'm moving like a water buffalo, because I threw my back out 4 days ago, the day before Donald Trump threw out Iran's nuclear program, I'm getting better because I doubled down on the relief factors in the last couple of days. Ice and heat, ice and heat. So I don't know when I'll be back trundling, but I'm moving around better than I was last Friday. And I'm here to tell you that's what Relief Factor helps you do. Helps you recover from the minor aches and pains of the everyday exercise that you're doing, whether it's going to the gym or going swimming or working weights or doing trundling or doing long distance running. Whatever it is that you do, even when you do something stupid, like pick up the wrong box of books the wrong way, Relief Factor is there to get rid of the minor aches and pains. I'm not going in for surgery. I'm not going in for an x-ray. I'm not going to a chiropractor. I'm not going to the physical therapist. I'm just going to not be stupid for a while. Take my Relief Factor, rest, ice, and heat. And you know what? We'll be fine. That's why I urge you, call 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, or go to their website. Find that starter pack, $19.95 for a 3-week supply. That's less than $1 a day. ReliefFactor.com. ReliefFactor.com. I'm going to break from my near continuous coverage of the U.S.-Israeli war against Iran and the ceasefire to talk with Administrator Loeffler. Kelly Loeffler is running the SBA, the Small Business Administration. She has been out on the road like trains, planes, and automobiles. She's been in Florida, Louisiana, North Carolina. I miss you in Maine, where I usually am this time of the year. Administrator Loeffler, you're in Indiana today. I hope you get to Ohio, God's country. But what are you doing out there on the road?
Well, we're getting out the word about the one big beautiful bill, and I promise you we are getting to Ohio very, very soon. That's going to be exciting. But I got to tell you, I'm talking to small businesses, whether it's restaurants and retailers, manufacturers. I was at the America's only bicycle manufacturer this morning about the benefits of the one big beautiful bill, and I'm listening to them because they already know. They know that this is a pro-Main Street, pro-worker, pro-small business bill that will make the tax cuts permanent, not just for hardworking Americans, but for our small businesses, our 34 million small businesses across this country that create 2 out of every 3 jobs and that are really the backbone of our communities. I mean, Hugh, you're a small business. You know what it means, the job creation, the innovation, the ability to have that certainty. So it's been really fascinating to listen and to make sure people understand the urgency of this, especially in Washington.
Administrator Loeffler, I've got 5.5 employees at the Hugh Hewitt Company, and I can't believe people are thinking about not voting for the BBB because it would be a massive hike on a small business. People will lose their jobs. I mean, how difficult is it for people to understand this?
Well, it's very difficult for Democrats. Every single one of them voted for a $4 trillion tax hike on hardworking Americans like yourself. They voted against border security. They voted to have illegal aliens on Medicaid and SNAP programs. So unfortunately, in the House, not a single Democrat voted for it. And it looks like as it moves into the Senate, not a single Senate Democrat is going to vote for this bill, this tax cut that Americans need. I mean, you're right. Businesses would not only have to lay off workers, some of them may have to shut down. It would mean that their taxes would double overnight. It would mean that there's no expensing on capital investment. And I can tell you from talking to manufacturers and restaurants, they're spring-loaded to invest if they can get that immediate expensing of capital investment, of R&D. Our country will be innovative again if they can deduct R&D expenses. And so we need to get that through sooner than later, because every day that this bill doesn't pass is another day that hardworking Americans, our innovative industries don't benefit from this bill. But Democrats are bound and determined to see it fail, and Republicans are not going to let that happen.
Now, Administrator Loeffler, there are a lot of people out there who do not know that the SBA does what it does. We have 2 minutes for a 2-minute explanation on what SBA does because I just don't think a lot of small businesses know the range of services you provide.
Well, the SBA is the Small Business Administration is really supporting the capital access needs of small businesses through our community lenders. We're not directly lending. We're empowering banks to have that government guarantee that to make that loan to that small business that they might not normally make that loan to. In fact, 60% of our loans under President Trump's first 100 days were to businesses with 5 or fewer employees. And those loans came from local lenders. And loan volume is up 80% in President Trump's first 100 days, showing the optimism that we've seen in polling for small businesses. We also lead federal contracting for small businesses, as well as disaster recovery. We're the #1 lender for responding from getting back up on their feet for small businesses and families alike after a hurricane or a tornado. We're the ones providing that relief. And then finally, we do a pretty wide range of counseling for small businesses or would-be entrepreneurs that want to come in to any of our 1,000 locations at our small business development centers. One of the things I'm most proud of is combining our public-private partnership for banks. So it's not purely government-led. It's our local lenders who strengthen our communities.
I'm always amazed that some small businesses do not know about the SBA because they're helpful in so many ways. Now I want to ask you one quick political question, Administrator Loeffler. You were a senator. Are you going to run for Senate again? Because your governor's not going to run, so a lot of people must be asking you, are you going to get back in the arena?
Well, as you can see, I've got my hands full here at the Small Business Administration, and there's no greater honor than to work for President Trump. His leadership, oh my goodness, we've just seen it on a world stage, what it means. It's incredibly humbling to be part of his administration. But I can tell you, Hugh, that we have to get that Georgia seat back. Georgians need representation in the U.S. Senate. It's critically important to our country, and we're going to continue to keep track of that race.
So if the president called you up and said, you know, Kelly, we love you in the cabinet and you're doing a great job, but we would love you back in the game, you wouldn't say no?
Look, I work for the president. It's a great honor. It's humbling. I hope the president thinks that I'm doing a great job at the SBA. And look, I'm here to serve our country. That was my commitment. I've been blessed to live the American dream. I want more people to do it. I grew up on a farm, first in my family to graduate from college. And so I'm just humbled to be able to be of service however I can. It was a great honor to serve in the Senate, and now working for the president is an even greater honor.
Well, it's a great fun having you here. Thank you for hitting the bricks. Those trips by principals matter a lot to the small businesses you visit, and I appreciate your being out there. Just make sure Indiana's kind of nice and flat and dull and happy, but you got to get over to Ohio if you really want to see where things are made, Kelly Loeffler. Thank you so much for joining me, and press on. Talk to you soon. Let me know when you make a decision about Georgia, if you make a decision about Georgia. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm coming right back with the conclusion of my interview with Yossi Klein Halevi. I do want to play for you, though, a couple of clips of the president on Air Force One this morning, because he was at his best on the gaggle, cut number 4.
Do you think you'll meet with Zelensky when you're there?
Yeah, probably. I'll see him. Yeah.
What would you say to him?
Say, how you doing? Tough. He's in a tough situation. Should have never been there.
How you doing? Cut number 5.
And I will tell you, the last thing on their minds is nuclear weapons. They don't even want to think about nuclear. And our B-2 pilots made this all possible. They had a magnificent hit in the dark of night with no moon, no light, no nothing. They hit the target perfectly, wiped it out. And the press is very disrespectful. I saw CNN fake news going, well, maybe it wasn't a perfect hit, it was perfect. They said maybe it did destroy it. We agree it did destroy it, but maybe it could have destroyed it more. No, it couldn't have destroyed it more. Everyone hit. And it's very disrespectful to those great geniuses and patriots that flew those planes through tremendous danger. So CNN and MSDNC are a disgrace. And so are the others.
And then one more, cut number 7, talking about what the Iranians are going to do next.
Mr. President, did Iran make any commitments yesterday about uranium enrichment?
About what?
About uranium enrichment.
They're not going to have enrichment, and they're not going to have a nuclear weapon, and they know that. They're going to get on to being a great trading nation. You know, they're very good traders, and they're going to be a great trading nation, and they have a lot of oil. They're going to do well. They're not going to have a nuclear weapon.
Did they promise?
They don't have to be a rogue state. They don't have to be crazy. The mullahs don't have to run it. Don't know what's going to happen there, but all eyes on Iran for the next year to see how that regime has shifted after getting pummeled for 2 weeks by Israel and then the coup de grace from the United States. Earlier today, I spoke with Yossi Klein Halevi, leading Israeli public intellectual. Here's the conclusion of that conversation. I am hoping that that's shattered, but I'm also hoping that the people of Lebanon realize they have a window to open to reclaim their sovereignty, and the people of Syria have a window open, and maybe even to the extent that reformist Palestinians want to get together and establish something other than radical ideological end days eschatology driving their lives, maybe they'll rise up. We'll see. Two final things, Yossi. A great writer in the United States, Noah Rothman, commented last night that a Jewish state, founded in large part by Holocaust survivors, using the last day of their war to strike the prison gates off of Irvin Prison, one of the most notorious, horrific prisons in the world, really was quite a statement for Israel to make. Did it resonate with you?
Very deeply. Frankly, I wish we'd gone an extra step. I wish we'd opened those gates, and I think that symbolically it was very important. As was our attack on Iran's doomsday clock, which is mounted in a central square in Tehran and marks time supposedly to until the destruction of Israel. In 2015, Ayatollah Khamenei predicted that Israel would be destroyed within 25 years. And in response to that prophecy, the regime mounted doomsday clocks all over the country, the most prominent being in Palestine Square in Tehran. And we attacked the clock yesterday. So I think that we had a very good day yesterday for symbols, yes. And symbols are important generally, matter. And especially in the Middle East. So.
And I when the clock went down, I thought maybe that will help people in the West understand what a group of fanatics the mullahs are at the top of that regime, to have a countdown clock to that, which means nuclear war. That's weird. All right, last comment, Yossi. I want to salute your and Daniel's maturity in assessing Netanyahu. He led the campaign relentlessly for 30 years to get rid of Iran. And you and Daniel, who are no fans of Netanyahu and no fans, and you're very up to, but you stopped
fair
to say.
Fair to say.
Yeah. And so I just thought, I wonder if America is ever going to be able to get back to the level of political maturity where either a Trump hater or a Trump lover can say something objectively against their priors in the way that you and Daniel did. Because that was very mature and I thought very healthy.
Well, thank you. That means a lot to me, you. I really appreciate that. And, before we're political beings, we're human beings. and none of us has a monopoly on the truth, even though we all think we do, especially these days. And something very strange has happened in the West, which is that we used to confine our certainties to religion. But as the West, but as the West has become a post-religious society, we've shifted our certainties to politics where they really don't belong. And all of that certainty and even theological arrogance with which people in different religions used to confront each other with, we've now transferred all of that to politics. And politics is not religion. It's not theology. It's a very imperfect attempt by flawed human beings to deal with a deeply flawed world. And that's politics. And so I can't relate to my political rivals as enemies. There's something really disturbing about that. And so thank you.
You're denying
I
them their
so much
humanity
appreciate
when
it.
that happens. When people cannot step
Yes.
back and say, good job, then you're denying them the ability to ever do a good job and therefore denying their ability to be human. Doesn't mean you don't go back the next day to bashing Netanyahu over court
I'm
reform
there
or whatever.
already.
Or
Don't worry.
okay,
I'm
good,
back.
good. Just, I want Israel, after you get some sleep, I want Israel to be back to normal. But Yossi, thank you for joining me. I'm glad everything has gone back to quiet, but I will continue to listen to you and Daniil on For Heaven's Sake every time. Congratulations on partnering with Dan Senor, because ARC Media is great, and I appreciate your taking the time with me today. Thank you, Yossi.
And I so much appreciate your friendship for Israel. It means the
Oh.
world to me. Thank you.
Always great to have Yossi or Michael Oren or Haviv Reddy Gur or Amit Segal. Anyone from Israel, they kind of have the front row seat at a show you're not sure you want to go to most days. Most days you want to be there, but some days you don't. That music means Lilacs is in the house, as in James Lilacs, noted humorist. You can read him at jameslilacs.substack.com or just go to lilacs.com, find the Diners podcast, enjoy. James, I want to talk to you about your friend Dave Barry, otherwise known as Medusa around here, because he turned me into stone when I met him at the St. Paul convention in 2012. He apparently has even fewer computer skills than I do. Were you aware of this?
No, I wasn't, and I don't remember him actually, giving you the cold shoulder at the time. My memory, I've retconned that whole thing to where we had a merry beer sitting outside in Seven Corners, but memory is.
No,
fat.
actually, I went gibberish. It wasn't him. I just didn't know how to talk to a funny person. You're the only other funny person I know, so I like his new book. I think you ought to write a memoir too, because I think it would be as funny as this. Have you ever thought about doing that?
I did, and I went back and I realized that I was a completely responsible little kid. I was the kind of kid who went to fourth grade wearing a briefcase and glasses, which guaranteed that I was going to be beat up. As a matter of fact, I was beat up by the bully in the class who was wearing crutches at the time. He actually beat me up while he was on crutches. So that gave me a long-standing aversion for conflict and adventure and the rest of it. So consequently, I would have to make up all the sort of adventures that people like Bill Bryson and Dave Barry have. So I've considered writing a memoir that's a complete act of fiction, but just not telling anybody.
What did you? If we look in the back of the North Dakota yearbook, the Fargo yearbook, and they list the clubs that you're in, what clubs are you in?
Well, aside from the club of people who were still laughing 10 years later that I was beat up by a bully on crutches, it would be speech and debate. That would be it. Maybe a little orchestra, but speech and debate was the main thing. We all gathered in a small little room, cut ourselves off from our peers, and learned how to pronounce words without dropping the G. That would be it. That's the extent of it, Hugh, I'm afraid.
Did you do original oratory, humorous, extemp, or debate?
All of the above, as a matter of fact. I wrote my own humorous pieces. I did extemporaneous speaking, which is great because they give you a topic and say 30 minutes, go. And then you have to go through your file cabinet and come up. I, the other day, saw a quote from a guy that we used to quote in extemp named John Bonzoff. He's a law professor, and the guy has been turning out quotes for 60 years. He had to have been a mere stripling when I was quoting him in Fargo, North Dakota in 75, and he's still around and talking. And, of course, speech and debate, which gave me, that wonderful ability to argue with equal conviction both sides of the story, which, comes in handy if you're a lawyer, but if you want to be believed by people, it can actually be a drawback.
I think the ability to talk 8 minutes in extemp in front of anyone is one of the great undervalued. But I went around to every high school within 30 miles of where I spend summers, said, "Do you need a speech and debate coach?" And they all said I had to become a credentialed teacher. I've been teaching law school since 1996. It's ridiculous, isn't it?
It's preposterous. I mean, my teachers were great teachers back in Fargo. We had an excellent debate system. But what we relied on more was psychological warfare. We had a teacher who taught us that. When we would show up for debate, we would drag in boxes of evidence, crates of evidence, file cabinets and the rest of it. Before we got up to speak, we'd little chloroseptic to give us that extra verbal edge. So we not only had a teacher who told us how to think and how to argue and how to reason, things which seem to be absent in today's debate, where they also lean more on emotion and deeply felt things. If you've seen some of the way the debate has gone, they taught us how to psych the other guys out. And so we were the big swinging heavyweights from Fargo, North Dakota, who would walk into all these little small school districts and absolutely clean the clock. I made it to state. I made it to the state finals and lost.
And lost. I made it to the National Catholic Finals, which is not the state finals. It's for Catholic schools. Got hammered at Pat O'Brien's the night before, and my tongue cleaved to my mouth on the day in the first round.
Well,
on the next
were you
morning.
first affirmative? Were you first affirmative, second affirmative, first neg, second neg?
No, it was extemp original. It was extemp on politics,
okay.
and I can't even remember what the subject was.
Okay,
no one
well,
told me
no,
that hurricanes had rum in them.
Well, I had to do that better myself. I, in high school, made the mistake of introducing myself to slow gin. The day before, we had to go back and do some debate. Now, the previous day in this debate, I had argued in favor of lowering the drinking age to 18. And here I was the next morning with my head clanging like Notre Dame on Easter, and I'm completely, utterly unable to speak. But I have to speak in favor of lowering the drinking age when the very thought of the thing made my hotel holiday and breakfast surge up the esophagus. So I know of what you speak now.
It's a terrible thing. Now, give me your quick 2 minutes on this weekend. How's it rate in terms of newsworthy weekends?
Absolutely extraordinary. For one thing, there's something about this that has that 80s feel to it. And, if you remember, I wouldn't exactly call the invasion of Grenada one of those things that put America back in the map and stood us up and made us feel big again. But it was actually sort of instrumental when we did something and did something quick and did it right. It went against a narrative of American military decline. And while we haven't had that narrative of decline, what we have had is an inability to finish anything narrative that's gone on since triumph without victory in the first Gulf War. So this sort of thing going all the way across the earth and delivering huge amounts of payloads and blowing things up and coming back without incident is one of those things that is a remarkable testament to American strength and power.
Yeah,
and
if
so
anyone in China wonders, can we do anything? The ability to fly from Missouri and come back without landing and destroy the nuclear program, they might take notice of that.
Well, it can focus the mind, but China is not Iran. And China, if we were to do something like that and say, nice three gorgeous dam you got there, shame if anything happened to it, you would have to come up against, I assume, anti-aircraft positions that are far more robust and well-defended than what Iran had. I mean, the fact that the Israelis took out what they did was a great assistance. But it was a big package. It was a big operation. And it's just extraordinary, again, to be reminded of the power and the reach that the U.S. has.
You're not wrong about Grenada, by the way. It was a little island. I think 23 Americans died and 100 were wounded, but it proved the Gulliver syndrome was over. We weren't tied down by small concerns, and I think that is a good remembrance today. Lilacs is in lilacs.com for everything. Listen to The Diner and go to jameslilacs.substack.com for everything Lilacs. Come right back as I close today's program, America, because I got a couple more Trump quotes from his trip this morning on Air Force One. He doesn't, actually, we can jam one in here. Cut number 7. Or not.
Did Iran make any commitments yesterday about uranium enrichment?
What?
About uranium enrichment?
They're not going to have enrichment, and they're not going to have a nuclear weapon, and they know that. They're going to get on to being a great trading nation. You know, they're very good traders.
I love that. They're just not going to do it. I'm about to play you a clip from MSNBC, fully aware that by doing so, I will expose it to millions more people than would otherwise have seen it, because the ratings of MSNBC are so bad. And if you don't believe me, just Google MSNBC ratings. It is a bloodbath. And nobody wants to watch them. Nobody cares. But I saw that they hosted John Brennan, former CIA director, the man I believe responsible for the Russia hoax and the ambush. I don't think James Comey was smart enough. Jim Clapper malign enough. I think John Brennan set up Clapper to set up Trump before he became president the first time. But John Brennan was on MSNBC himself yesterday, saying the most absurd thing, cut 13.
I think the credibility of this administration really has been shattered. I mean, I don't think it was ever strong, but it has been shattered over the past several weeks. The U.S. intelligence community, by all accounts, still assesses that Iran has not restarted their nuclear weapons program, which they suspended in 2003. There's been no contrary claims by this administration that the U.S. intelligence has changed on that front whatsoever. And even if they were moving, as they were, with more highly enriched uranium, they still were far away from actually being able to get a warhead. So what was the triggering
I really
event?
don't know if John Brennan knows he's lying or if John Brennan is that stupid. I don't think he's stupid, so I think he's lying. And everybody who's explained that the intelligence assessment of 03 leaked in 07 in an attempt to preempt Bush administration action, simply refused to understand that their definitional parameters meant that under their definitional parameters, Iran wasn't moving towards a nuclear weapon, but in the real world, they were running for it. And they were doing so repeatedly against a backdrop of lies and deceits. So you really can't believe anything John Brennan says. And so when John Brennan goes on MSNBC to talk about anything, turn it off. And until MSNBC figures that out, their ratings will continue to fall through the floor. Finally, Donald Trump gets a question about Putin today on the Air Force One, cut number 18.
I'd like to see a deal with Russia. As you know, Vladimir called me up. He said, "Can I help you with Iran?" I said, "No, I don't need help with Iran. I need help with you." And I hope we're going to be getting a deal done with Russia.
Now, you see, I think that is funny. I also think it's the way that you deal with a madman, dictator, killer, war criminal, which is to say, you're the problem, we don't need your help, but not to call him a war criminal dictator to his face, because that doesn't advance the prospect of ending the war in Ukraine. Talking to him in that pseudo-jovial way does, and I would recommend that to everyone involved in a conflict with anyone. Adopt a pseudo-jovial tone of voice, and you go a lot further in getting your way. The art of the deal. The art of the deal. I'll be back tomorrow, America.